Ever since he was little, Daniel only wanted one thing: his father's love. A simple look of approval, a kind word, maybe a warm hug at the end of the day. But instead, all he ever got was silence. A cold silence, the kind that stings more than any yell. Have you ever felt like no matter what you do, it's never enough for someone? Now imagine being a child and feeling that from your own father. How do you grow up whole when the one person you needed most always kept their distance? Stay with me until the end because this story is going to touch your heart. Daniel was only 6 when he first noticed it. The way his father's eyes passed right through him, like he wasn't even there. Other kids would run into their dads' arms after school, excited to share their day. Daniel? He learned to wait quietly by the door, hoping his father might ask how his day was. He never did. His mom tried to fill the gap. She gave the hugs, the bedtime stories, the words of encouragement. But no matter how much she loved him, Daniel still watched the front door every evening, hoping today might be different. That today his dad might smile at him, maybe even say he was proud. But the truth was hard. His father was the kind of man who believed love was weakness, that a boy should be strong, silent, obedient. Emotions? Those were for women, not for sons. And so Daniel learned to keep everything inside. The good grades, the bruises from the playground, the nights he cried himself to sleep. He kept it all to himself. One night, he drew a picture at school. A little house with 3 stick figures. He gave his dad a big smile in the drawing. When he handed it to him, beaming with pride, his father barely glanced at it before setting it aside without a word. That moment stayed with Daniel for years. It wasn't about the picture. It was about the silence. The lack of even a nod, a smile, a simple thank you. At 6 years old, Daniel started believing something was wrong with him. That maybe, just maybe, he didn't deserve his father's love. And that belief, it shaped the rest of his life in ways he couldn't yet understand. As the years passed, Daniel became an expert at hiding, not just physically but emotionally. He stopped showing excitement when he won something at school. He stopped trying to make jokes at the dinner table. He stopped drawing pictures. Every time he tried to reach out and was met with coldness, a little piece of him quietly gave up. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a small hope remained that maybe, one day, his father would change. That one moment of affection would finally prove Daniel was worth loving. Middle school came, and with it, new challenges. Daniel wasn't the biggest or the loudest, but he was smart. He worked hard, got top grades, always stayed out of trouble. But at home, none of that mattered. His father barely looked up from the TV when Daniel showed him a straight-A report card. His mother, always gentle, tried to compensate, cheering for every achievement. But even her love couldn't erase the sting of her husband's indifference. It wasn't just silence anymore. It was absence, even when he was in the same room. The emotional weight started taking its toll. Daniel stopped inviting friends over. He couldn't bear the idea of them seeing how quiet and tense his home was. He envied their stories about dads who played catch, who came to school plays, who simply said, "I love you," without hesitation. To Daniel, those stories felt like fairy tales. His reality was filled with unspoken rules. Don't interrupt, don't show weakness, don't expect affection, and above all, don't hope too much. Then one day during a school meeting, something cracked. Daniel had won a regional science award, and the principal called to personally invite his parents to the ceremony. His mother promised she would be there, and to everyone's surprise, his father agreed to go too. For the first time in years, Daniel felt something flicker inside him. Maybe this was the moment. Maybe finally, his dad would see him. He walked onto the stage with shaky hands, holding his little certificate, scanning the crowd for his parents. His mom stood near the back, waving with a big, proud smile. His father wasn't there. He didn't even show up. Later that night, when Daniel asked him why, his father simply said, "I had better things to do." No apology, no guilt, Just those 5 words that crushed whatever little hope Daniel had left. That night something changed in Daniel. He didn't cry. He didn't yell. He just sat on his bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what it was about him that made his own father turn away every single time. High school was a blur of routine for Daniel. He got up early, studied hard, kept his head down. His teachers praised his dedication, and some even pulled him aside to ask if everything was okay at home. He always smiled and said yes. Because, how do you explain that your biggest wound isn't visible? That the person who should have loved you the most made you feel like you didn't exist? So he kept pretending. Pretending he was fine. Pretending he didn't care. But the truth was, it hurt. It hurt every time he saw a dad hugging his son after a football game. It hurt when he heard his classmates complain about their fathers being too overprotective or too involved. Daniel would have given anything to have a dad who cared too much. What he had was silence, and silence can scream louder than anything. He began to numb himself. He stopped trying to earn love. He focused on survival. School became his escape, his structure, the only place where his effort seemed to matter. At home, things were no different. His father remained cold and distant. Conversations were limited to instructions or criticisms. If Daniel came home late, it was a problem. If he stayed quiet in his room, it was a problem. No matter what he did, he felt wrong, like an unwanted guest in his own house. His mom saw the pain, but even she couldn't break through her husband's wall. She tried to protect Daniel, tried to reassure him with soft words and warm meals, but she was growing tired too. Tired of living in a house where love wasn't allowed to breathe. Then something unexpected happened. A new teacher, Mr. Hayes, took an interest in Daniel. He wasn't pushy, just present. He asked how Daniel was doing, commented on his writing, encouraged him to think beyond grades, to express himself. For the first time in a long while, someone saw Daniel. Not just his performance, but his pain, and that cracked something open. Daniel began staying after class, talking with Mr. Hayes, slowly letting parts of himself out that had been buried for years. One afternoon, Mr. Hayes said something simple, but it hit hard. He said, "You don't have to earn love, Daniel. The right people will love you just for being you." Daniel didn't answer. He just nodded. But when he got home that day, he locked himself in his room and cried. Not because he was sad, but because for the first time in his life, he wondered if maybe he wasn't broken. Maybe it wasn't his fault. If this story has touched you in any way, leave a like now and share it with someone who might need to hear it. College offered Daniel the escape he had been silently craving for years. He got a scholarship in another city, and the day he packed his bags, he didn't look back. His mom hugged him tight, tears in her eyes, whispering how proud she was. His father? He stayed in the kitchen, not even saying goodbye. Daniel didn't expect anything different. And yet, as the bus pulled away, part of him still wished, absurdly, that his dad would come running after him. But the road stayed, empty, and so did that part of Daniel's heart. Freedom felt strange at first. For the first time he could breathe, sleep peacefully, laugh out loud without watching his back. He started making real friends. People who liked him not for what he did, but for who he was. Slowly, he opened up about his childhood, piece by piece. Some cried with him. Others shared similar stories. It was through those conversations that Daniel realized he wasn't alone, that his pain had a name, and that healing wasn't just possible, it was already beginning. Despite the distance, his mother called often, always checking in, always reminding him to eat, to rest, to keep going. She never spoke badly of her husband, but Daniel could hear the sadness in her voice. She had spent her life trying to love enough for two, and now, without him in the house, she was alone with the same silence that once surrounded Daniel. It made him feel guilty, but also more determined than ever to build a life different from the one he came from. Then, During his second year, he met Maya. She was quiet, thoughtful, and saw right through him from the start. They spent hours talking, often about nothing, but sometimes about everything. One night she asked him, "Why do you flinch when someone raises their voice?" He paused, looked at her, and for the first time, said it out loud. "Because my father never raised his voice, but his silence hurt more than any scream." Maya didn't try to fix him. She just held his hand, and in that moment Daniel realized something powerful. He had spent his whole life chasing the love of a man who wasn't capable of giving it. But that didn't mean he was unworthy of love. It just meant he had to stop seeking it in the wrong place. Healing didn't happen all at once. It came in small steps, like the first time he laughed without guilt, or the first time he looked in the mirror and saw someone worth loving. Each moment, each choice, slowly rebuilt the parts of him that had been broken in silence. Years passed, and Daniel built a life grounded in love, not fear. He graduated, started a career in education, wanting to be the kind of adult he never had. He married Maya, and together they created a home filled with warmth, laughter, and truth. When they had their first child, a boy named Leo, Daniel stood in the hospital room holding that tiny life in his arms, overwhelmed by a promise he made silently to himself. "I will never make you feel invisible." Being a father unlocked something inside Daniel. Every time he kissed Leo goodnight, every time he knelt down to listen to him, every time he said, "I'm proud of you," it was like healing another layer of his own childhood. He wasn't just raising a son, he was breaking a cycle. One hug at a time. One word of encouragement at a time. He didn't have a model to follow, but somehow his heart knew what to do, because it had learned what not to do. But even with all the love around him, there was still one unresolved piece of the puzzle: his own father. Daniel hadn't spoken to him in years, not out of hatred, but out of self-preservation. He had accepted that closure might never come. Until one day, out of nowhere, he got a call. It was his mom. She said his father had been diagnosed with a terminal illness. He didn't have long, and he was asking to see Daniel. The news shook him. After all the silence, all the years, now his father wanted to talk. Daniel didn't know what to feel. Anger, confusion, hope. Maya gently reminded him that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about freeing yourself. So Daniel took a breath, looked at his son sleeping peacefully, and decided it was time. He drove back to his childhood home. Everything looked smaller, quieter, older. His father was lying in bed, thin and pale, his eyes softer than Daniel remembered. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Then his father spoke, voice trembling. "I didn't know how to love you, Daniel. And I'm sorry." Daniel didn't cry. He didn't yell. He simply sat down beside him and said, "I know. I spent my whole life thinking it was my fault. But it wasn't." That conversation didn't erase the past, but it gave Daniel something he never thought he'd get. An answer, a small piece of peace, and sometimes that's all we need to finally let go. In the final weeks of his father's life, Daniel visited him often. Not out of obligation, but out of a quiet compassion. He brought Leo once, and watched as the boy smiled shyly at the grandfather he'd never really known. His father, too weak to speak much, reached out and touched Leo's hand. It was the first time Daniel had ever seen that gesture from him, small but powerful. In that single touch, Daniel saw something that had taken a lifetime to appear: regret, and maybe the shadow of love. When his father passed away, Daniel didn't cry immediately. His grief wasn't simple. It came in waves, not just for the man who died, but for the years lost, the hugs never given, the words never spoken. But instead of letting that pain swallow him, Daniel chose something else. He chose to remember what he had built in spite of the silence. A life of meaning. A love that never needed to be earned. He stood at the funeral with Maya and Leo by his side, and spoke not about the man his father had been, but about the lessons his absence had taught him. He said, "Sometimes, the greatest gift a parent can give is the reminder of who not to become." It was raw, it was honest, and in that honesty, Daniel found strength, because he had broken the cycle, and that was enough. Back home, life went on. Leo grew older, and every time he looked into his son's eyes, Daniel felt a surge of emotion, part pride, part healing, part quiet joy. He never missed a birthday, a school event, a chance to say, "I love you," because he understood the power of presence, of words, of simply being there. He knew what it meant to be unseen, and he would never let his son feel that same ache. Years later, Leo asked him, "Dad, were you scared to become a father?" Daniel smiled and said, "Yes, but not because I didn't know how to love, because I knew how much it mattered." And that moment and that simple conversation became one of Daniel's most treasured memories, proof that he had become the father he never had. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all, that we are not bound by the pain we come from. We have the power to rewrite the story, one choice at a time, one act of love at a time. No matter where we start, we can choose how it ends. Daniel's story isn't just about a father who couldn't love. It's about a boy who learned that his worth was never tied to someone else's ability to show affection. It's about breaking, free from silence, from coldness, from the weight of always wondering, "What's wrong with me?" and realizing the answer was nothing. The life he built, with Maya, with Leo, with every hug and every "I'm proud of you," was proof that healing is possible, that you don't have to repeat the past. You can feel the pain, face it, and still choose something better. Daniel chose love, not because he saw it growing up, but because he knew what the world looked like without it. And he wanted something more for his son. Maybe you felt invisible too. Maybe someone you loved made you question your value. If that's your story, I hope Daniel's journey reminds you that it's not the end. You can find peace. You can become everything they weren't. And most importantly, you are worthy, or just as you are. If this story touched your heart, take a second to like the video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. True stories that remind us of the strength we carry, even through the silence.